Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chit Chat with Dima and Rob. Today, we have Rob with a conflict, but we have an amazing guest that I'm so excited to have him join us. And we have Noah Boudreaux. Hello, Noah.
Hello, Dima. How are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thank you. This is great to be here. Sorry, Rob couldn't make it tonight. It's his loss, right?
Absolutely. There's going to be a lot of interesting conversation, I know. So, Noah, tell us about yourself.
I've been around a little while. I started my career about 25 years ago. I've been in IT the entire time, and really developed a passion early on in life for technology. And when I started deep in the technology. I was a nerd for a long time, really getting deep into programming and some other areas. And over time, you start to kind of drift from some of those things and want to get involved in new things, and started learning a little bit more about management and obviously leadership that came with that. And it really became something that I embraced and became just as passionate, if not more passionate about those things in the second half of my career than I was in the tech on the first half. And so I kind of really have leaned into that a lot over the last decade, and have really got to work for some amazing companies. I'm currently with VENYU Solutions. I'm the general manager there. I've been there about 5 years, and we're a data center consulting and services company, and we're headquartered in Baton Rouge, so right here in our own backyard. But we work with companies around the country. And it's really been an amazing time there, and I'm excited with the work that we're doing.
Well, that's great. I know you had a life-changing experience when you were 11 years old around Christmas. So tell us what happened.
It was life-changing. Everything when you're a kid, it seems like it's life-changing. But when I was growing up, like many of you, I was just adored Christmas, and every kid does. And you have your traditions at home, and we have traditions obviously at Christmas time. But usually it's right after Thanksgiving is when it got really hot, right? That's when you kind of get the excitement going on, and people know that it's coming. Mm-hmm. But at the Boudreaux household, we would bring home, or my mom would bring home the annual subscription to the Sears Christmas catalog. So, when you're 10, 11 years old, that is a big deal. I had 3 sisters. We'd literally sit around the table and start going through the pages with it. And, I never know what I was going to find. It might be a train set. It might be my next, remote control car or something like that. But this year, I stumbled on something different. And that year, it particularly stood out to me, because it really started to shape my view around technology. So going through the pages, I found something called the Omnibot. And the Omnibot was about the coolest robot I could ever describe at the time. This is, in the early 80s. So go figure, about as good as it could be at that time. But, it kind of stood out. It basically described all the things it could do, and it really jumped off the page at me. It was like it could bring you breakfast in the morning and tie your shoes and play with your dog, and everything that I thought would be so cool to have this little mini bot that would be my friend, in other words, just seemed so exciting. So that was I was destined to get that robot that year. The problem was bringing it to my mom and dad was a little bit of a shocker, because it was not an inexpensive robot.
Right? How much was it?
$400 or $500, and in our household that was no small amount. Mm-hmm. And I really had to daily talk to them about and get a feeling. Is there anything? This is really all I want? This is kind of what I want this year. In any way possible, I'm going to get this thing. And I get mixed vibes. Like my mom sometimes would give me that look, there's no way in the heck you're getting that. But it was there was nothing else that I really had my eye set on. And I was a kind of do or die. I'm either going to get it or get this.
Nothing else will get you breakfast. I can't think of anything else.
Oh, exactly. So I get through all of that, and Christmas morning comes, and I run out of bed and get to the tree, and lo and behold, you think I got the robot, Dima?
I don't know. I'm curious.
Of course I got that robot. I really had to.
Yes. I'm so glad you didn't get Thomas the train.
I mean, that's a that's two worlds apart between Thomas the Train and Omnibot. But no, seriously, when I really thought about it, I thought my mom was my champion, right? But my dad had really pushed it hard for me to get it in hindsight. And the reason he did that, he was an avid reader, right? So he knew what was going on. He was not in technology, but he knew that technology was the world, was the future. And he always wanted me to get into it. And if this was going to get me down that path and start me interested in something like that, to him at the time, I think it was worth the investment. And so I got it. And, it was one of those wow moments. I get it out of the box and I'm starting to play with it, getting it on. And the first thing, it won't come on, and it needs like 8 batteries or something like that. It's like, who has 8 batteries in their house? But I think they thank goodness they planned ahead and they had them. So
for that price, they should come with the batteries.
No, not at that time. Everything does now, but nothing came with it back then. You had to plan ahead, or you'll have a terrible Christmas morning because you have no batteries and no storage.
Nothing works.
I mean, that's just the saddest moment. But it came on and made all the bloop bloop noises and stuff like that. And I start to interact with it, tie my shoe, what can you do here? I start to try to give it the commands, and it basically just blinked, and it wouldn't do very much. And when you start reading the instructions, you realize why this thing needs to be programmed. And that got my first little shocker about programming is a big part of getting the technology to work. And actually, it was an extremely fun process. But you had to tell it each and every turn to make, how to get into the kitchen, take 10 feet here, 2 feet to the left, every little nook and cranny, how to bring its hands out and back and roll back to you afterwards. So I probably got through about 5 or 6 tasks with it, kind of going through all of those iterations. And you learn a lot, though. I mean, that was really what I started really understanding. If I'm going down this path, it's not just turning the on button and telling it to go get me. It's going to take a little bit of work. But, my mindset at that time, I was very much into that type of thinking. Logical problems just amazed me, and I just enjoyed it. So I kept down the road, and here we go. What has it been? 30 years later? Here I am.
Calculating, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but I really felt like that started to get me excited about where technology was going, and certainly has been a lot of things that have influenced me over the years. But I always felt like something happened then that got me exposed to it, and obviously, 30, 35 years later, here we are looking at a lot more sophisticated of robots that are out there.
Wow. So the main question is, did it make breakfast for you? Did it cook breakfast?
It did not cook breakfast. My mom still cooked all the breakfast, but it could bring it back to me. If my dogs didn't steal the bacon off of the plate before it made it.
No way.
It was a short robot. It was only like 3 feet tall, but it was. In hindsight, I wasn't misled per se, but you had to put work into getting it to do some of the things that you wanted it to do.
Wow.
It was good. It was a fun time. And I, like I said, got me on the path. And certainly today, when I look at everything going around us with technology, AI and things like that, it kind of takes me back there in comparison to what we looked like back then and what we look like now, and what we're going to look like in another 35 years is amazing.
So what are we going to look like in 30, 40 years?
Well, I'm going to look exactly the same, I hope. No, we're in a fast time. We went through 2020. I think we got a little taste of what's going on, and the speed of how things are changing. And when we did that, it even opened my eyes. In 2020, I started working from home a lot, like everyone else, and we were, at the beginning, we were here with our kids. They were homeschooled. We had jobs to do, and we were all in different areas of the house. But of course, kids are going to gravitate to where you are.
Yeah.
And surely enough, they would end up in the areas that I was working. I'm surprised they're not in here now, to tell you the truth. But they would, and they hear what's going on. They hear you working. They hear things you're saying. They pick up on that. I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, so they're pretty savvy in asking some questions. They hear me work, and then I'd get questions later in the day like, "Dad, what is infrastructure?" And I'd be, explain infrastructure to an 8-year-old. I thought I did a pretty good job, but she says she got it, and I was kind of. It makes you think even more when you have to explain it at that to a child, and yeah. I think there's something to be said for that, and the clarity of communications we need across the board. But they were very interested, and what struck me one day was they had more questions. I think one day she even asked, "Dad, what's a P&L?" And a P&L. Yeah, I have to think about this one, how to explain this one to you. And I was in the middle of something, so I couldn't get to it. And she went off and did her thing, but she didn't forget. And I assumed it would come back. And that night we're making dinner and stuff like that. And she's at the table, and she says, of course, "Alexa, what's a P&L?" I'm like, wait, where did this come from? So I think the generation knows to ask the AI, Alexa, Siri, what have you, what things are, and they're learning a lot from those. They have a relationship with them now that I definitely didn't have a relationship with the Omnibot, right? It's a different world. And I'm so glad. You're glad to hear that? It was just, I struck me, and I was kind of taken back. And even though Alexa did reply to her and kind of told her very straight facts, what a P&L is, profit and loss statement, and it kind of went into it, but it was way over her head. And so I did sit and kind of try to clarify it for her, and she said, "Hey, that was better than Alexa." I was like, "Well, thank you." I'm glad.
Yeah, competition.
But it really showed me, number one, they're in tune to what we're doing, learning a lot about business and how things work in the world, just observing us, and then but how they use AI is so different and natural. Yeah. And when we think about AI and where it's going, I think of her generation. It's that generation that's really going to have that. Embrace it. And I've been doing a webinar recently called The Future of Work, and it kind of reflects on how is AI going to influence us in the future, not just day to day, but in our work environment. Are we, when we're working 5, 10, 15 years from now, how are they going to influence the way that we're doing things in the office or even from home, like we are a lot nowadays? But it's that type of thing. And I really think that it's going to come. It's going to have. It's so many benefits, but it's going to happen so rapidly, and that's what a lot of skeptics out there, I think, are looking at the time frame that it's taken us to get from where we were 35 years ago, or starting with revelations that were being had back in the 1930s about working with AI. It's been a long time, and here we are now. I think you got to say there's something to be said for the Alexa power that we have. But again, is it as far as we would have predicted it to be at this point in time? Maybe not. But I think it's going to get there a lot faster than many people are assuming.
So when you talk about the future of work, I believe it's going to be simple. So AI will be the boss, and we do the work.
Well, it could be.
This is practical. Give it to a human.
There's a chance for anything with that type of stuff. I really feel that AI is going to be very positive. Overall, it has flaws, and there's all of the skeptics and the dark side of AI that people talk about that has some potential to surface. But I don't think that's where it's going. I really think it's going to be a very positive transition. And yes, it will be able to function and do a lot of tedious tasks, and maybe those tasks that humans don't even want to do. But it'll be some things it'll change the shape of the workforce, but not really displace the people, right? It'll be new skills that we and the rest of the world will have to learn or sharpen to make sure that there's a differentiator and what we're doing, bringing to the table rather than what AI can do. Because it'll be working on the fast and how to do things faster, quicker, more efficient, sure. But it won't be able to do any of the interactions like this and really have the people conversations that are needed today. As they call it, the emotional intelligence that I think is so important in the social aspect of work and life. And that's where we're going to win out. So it won't be like the Terminators come in and everything's robots, but there will be a change in how we have to work with AI. And that's going to be significant and maybe a lot for some people to handle. I think in my position, because I kind of work with it all the time, I'm almost used to seeing it and expecting it to happen. But those that don't, it may be a little bit of a shocker. So I've been trying to just kind of educate others on how to prepare for it and get ready for things that are coming.
Wow. So if we take a step back, for anyone who doesn't know what is AI, like how would you categorize it for them? How would you explain what is AI?
It's a little confusing, and I think because of the way it's been talked about in so many different ways, people that aren't aware will gravitate to the robot type thing, and it's really really something else. I mean, it's all around us, and I think if you think about some of the ways that we use it today, it probably don't even realize. For instance, with some music applications or movie applications like Netflix, you may watch a couple of movies and then you'll notice it starts recommending movies that are similar or that you may like. And so that is a version of AI where it's recognizing a pattern that you're doing things repetitively. So I think you're going to like this, or even on Amazon, if it recommends a book or things like that. That is really a good example of how AI is getting very good at identifying patterns of people and how we use technology. But it takes it a level deeper and that would be framed up as something called machine learning. And you have another element of AI called deep learning. Deep learning is more natural language recognition. Alexa, for example, how can it recognize you talking to it? You have a different way of speaking than I do, and different people talk to it in slightly different ways, and it has to process that and understand what you're saying, and then execute on the request. Sometimes good, sometimes not so good. Anybody who has an Alexa or Siri knows what I'm talking about. It's not always on point, but it's still, you could tell that the potential is there. And I think that's the important thing that I see is that, all right, it's not perfect, but it is on the right track. And with what's happening today, with the explosion, and I do mean explosion of data that is kind of out there, AI has more to feed on. Data is the fuel. With all the things going on, with everything under the sun is talking to the internet, feeding it a little bit more information. The Internet of Things, as it's called today, it all has this cycle of feeding feeding the data, and AI is going to take advantage of it and to learn more and do things a little better than they do today. And that's what's really shifting. And when that starts to happen, more and more data, there's more and more ways for it to get better faster. And that's why I think we're going to see some improvements in a very short time frame.
Right. So we get overwhelmed with all of this data, but with AI, it's what feeds them. That's what excites them in a way.
That is the key thing that's different than if you look at the trajectory since whatever the last 100 years, and people may have skepticism around, well, it's really going to take a lot longer. And, that's justified if you look at how it's trended. And then when you get to over the last 10 years and see the explosion of data that's occurred, you can kind of start to see, well, and if this continues, and if that's what feeds AI, then there's certainly potential it's going to get a lot better based on just that alone. Yeah. And that's what I feel is happening. I mean, in our work at VENYU, we that's one of our mainstays is the making data invincible. How do we house that data and store that data? And we have firsthand a firsthand knowledge of the amount of data that's out there that's being consumed just by the customers that we have, not to mention everything going on in the world
globally. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing, but it's why I get excited about it. Is because I can see the trends happening. I can see AI's getting better and better, and I even get frustrated with it at times because I know it's not where it needs to be. And so there's examples that Tesla driving cars. I have a buddy that has a Tesla, and I mean he loves the Tesla, and it's a great car, and he gets me out to the parking lot. He wants to show me the trick of the day, and I was excited to watch it because I do really love this stuff. Yeah, and we're going to come and pick him up from the parking lot, right back out of the
Just like the old what is it? The series. I used to watch it in Jordan where the car would come pick up the person. I forgot what it's called. The magic something. Yeah.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's really
good.
There
was a show called Knight Rider where it was the car would come and do that, but that's ages back.
Was it Tesla? I wonder.
No, it wasn't a Tesla, but the Tesla, he called it from his. I think he did it on his watch, and it starts up. It backs up, and I'm ready for it to kind of make its way, and it went back into the spot and backed up again. Wow. It got confused. And look. It wasn't that surprising that it did because the parking lot is not in the best shape. Lines aren't there. It got cracks in the road. It doesn't have that perfect environment for it to be able to find and get to it. And I think if it did, it would have made it no problem. But that's the challenge with AI right now. Things are not going to be perfect, and that's why people with self-driving cars. It's like, well, we see a few accidents going on even now. And you realize it's not perfect, but I wouldn't have expected it to be right now. Mm-hmm. But the amount of data that it's getting fed, not just from his Tesla. Think about my friend's Tesla. It's every Tesla out there, feeding network and kind of learning from each other, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so it will get there. I think sooner than most people are giving it credit for.
Wow. Well, think of also Alexa and Siri and all of those collecting data all the time from us.
They are.
Yeah. It's horrifying.
And if you have one, you know it's happening, even in our house. I mean, you'll say something and accidentally it'll trigger it. And then you're like, okay, well, did it hear what I said? Well, it did. Or it hears the television saying things, and it's just kind of, you almost get comfortable with it. Yes, you assume your privacy is being kept, but I think that's kind of that's a little bit of the balance you're paying right now to use that technology. And people will get it will get better, and we'll get better at understanding it and getting comfortable with it. But that's kind of where it is at the moment. But wow. We have a couple in the house, so we use them. My kids use them all the time. Like I said,
do they communicate with each other too?
I haven't heard that happen yet. I think I've seen that people will do the Alexa and Siri and try to make them talk with each other.
Oh,
But
wow.
that might frustrate me. I haven't seen that yet, but they're not. That's why they don't have that level of skill to hold a conversation. It's a one way. You ask this, I tell you this, kind of a thing. But they do make. I could see getting smarter. They're making recommendations. More on the. We have one is called Alexa Show, so it kind of has the visuals. It'll show you the weather for the day. You drive to work. What's going on in the world, news, and it's starting to show more and more relevant things that I would be interested in. I noticed. So it's picking that up from somewhere.
Wow.
Either requests that I give it or things.
It's reading what's important to you. Wow.
Somehow, and sometimes I wonder, am I just thinking this? But I'm pretty sure it's picking up on it. And it's it's just more relevant stories than it used to show me. It's more things that would be important to me to start the day, and just kind of what's going on in the world, and it's helpful. So it's learning. It's getting more intuitive.
But it's not telling you the information that you don't want to hear or know about, right? So as a result, you could become isolated from the bigger picture because it's feeding or giving you the information that it thinks you want.
Well, there's something there. I don't think so right now, but there's speculation out there that does occur, individualized and not necessarily generalized. Where there's a documentary that you probably heard of called The Social Dilemma. The social dilemma is a very, very
it's a dilemma.
intense. It's intense. I was a little bit taken back by it, and it goes into what really goes on in the Google, Facebook, the search engines of the world, and how they're leveraging data. Initially, it was for advertisement, so you could tell what you like, so it could advertise to you things that are relevant to you and potentially buy. But the documentary goes into a lot deeper discussion around how the AI of those systems is starting to become manipulative. And I don't think it was ever intended this way, but I think it's starting to manipulate individuals based on your preferences. And so you may see different stories and news headlines than I see because of those things. And is it trying to influence you one way or another because of that? And this is the whole, I have to believe there's something to that, even though it's to the extent of what it's occurring. I think more depending on your usage of some of those social applications, you may be more susceptible to something like that. And I even want my kids to watch it with me next time, so that they're aware of the power it can have on you. And so AI is going to be powerful, but it has the potential to do not so good things, and not even by the instruction of the big three. It's not Facebook or Google, I don't think, telling it to be manipulative, but the AI is so good that it's just learning on its own and being manipulative.
It took a life of its own.
It is a life of its own.
Control it.
And that's what's scary.
Yeah.
There is a little bit of scary side to that, but it's kind of, at some point, and the documentary says it, we've got to look past it. We've got to be we have to stay in control of this. We have to get back in control of what's going on, so that we can leverage those things for all, the right purposes. And certainly there's always going to be some of that going on, if not a lot. I mean, even in, you take things like cybersecurity, which, we do a lot of that at VENYU, and we can see the technology to protect yourself is getting more and more driven by AI. So it has it's advanced enough so it can kind of understand what's going on in your network and see those patterns and do that way faster than a human ever could.
I have a feeling you want to horrify our viewers today. and they're not going to sleep tonight because they're just going to be thinking about everything you're sharing. We should have done this chit chat at 7 a.m.
Eyes wide open mentality.
Yeah.
You know these things are going on. You have to kind of be optimistic about it. That's my attitude. It is something we're dealing with, but would you rather just pretend it's not happening? I think we have a chance to kind of steer the ship right. And you know, the AI thing on the cyber front, yes, there are tools that the hackers have to do similar things. So it's kind of this ongoing battle. But on the Google and the search engine front, I think it's just over time we'll get better at hopefully we get better at being able to control some of the more manipulative things that it may be doing, and not get too bought into that, and use it more for positive stuff.
Right. Wow. Okay. So I'm curious. So you got the Omnibot when you were 11 years old. What is your next robot?
I've been looking for 35 years for my next robot, and I think I finally found it.
Okay, tell us what's your next robot? Yeah.
So there are a lot of different robot manufacturers out there, and one recently that I uncovered was Hanson Robotics, and they developed a robot named Sophia. And Sophia is the real deal because it is. Yes, it looks like it's a human figure face. It has the ability to hold conversations better than I've ever seen. And there's some things out there that people can watch. It really has an interaction to it, an engagement to it that I haven't seen before. And it pick up on facial cues, tone of voice, and kind of adjust the way that it's speaking back to you based on those things. That is incredible. Now, Sophia it's been around a while, and I think even she was named as a citizen in Saudi Arabia.
So, you called her as she. So now you're calling a robot as she. Omnibot. Omnibot was an it, and now
I can't help it.
As a she.
That's how close they're getting to the real thing. It certainly, you still know you're speaking to a robot, but there's something about the experience feel with that as opposed to what people have dealt with, or what I dealt with Omnibot. It's two different worlds apart. But it works on the same technology that we're talking about, right? The AI is feeding from data that it's being given and learning all the time. And it is more sophisticated than ever to pick up on, to read the human characteristic and actually hold a conversation.
Can they hold a conversation with each other? Like, can two robots get to read?
I have seen it do that. Yes, but it wasn't as satisfying as like watching a conversation. It was a little bit staggered. But again, I give it credit because it's still early. But it is doing that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a pretty it's an awesome looking tool. The robot AI revolution is really going to change some things in how we, like I said, the future of work and how we live our lives and interact with them and see them, right? Like even with when I mentioned the Omnibot, I still see that as it's an object. And but with Sophia, you start to kind of say, well, it's not human, but I'm not seeing it as just an object, right? Mm-hmm. You kind of have, it's a weird understanding.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. First time I hear someone refer to a robot as she. That's fascinating. And here
we have to call it it.
You can't. If she's reading your emotions, and it can't be an it. And she's collecting.
I don't think so. And it's really cool. And she has a little sister named Little Sophia that is a smaller size version of her that you can actually is starting to be available for purchase. And its design was originally to help children get acclimated with STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so it really has a great story around it, and it's still in some of the early stages of its development, but I can see where they're going with it. It has the same characteristics as the larger size Sophia, but it's really made for kids to interact with it and learn a lot about science and get them kind of like Omnibot did with me, got me interested in all of those things. Right. It's doing the same thing. It's just not widespread yet, but I think it looks like it has a ton of potential. It might have to get one.
Yeah, well, when you get one, we'll invite you back to the show, but we'll need Rob to be here too, because I'm sure.
Yeah, Rob's got to chime in because I know he's a technology guy and he can probably add a lot to, my observations on it too.
Wow, so fascinating. And here we go. We got Sophia collecting data. So out of curiosity, how much data we have in this world?
Well, we recently did a presentation for a local group called the PMI, and I was looking at that, and the number is probably going to astound you. Well, once I tell you how much it is, it's 59 zettabytes. Okay, so everybody, what in the heck is a zettabyte? Yeah, and I love Back to the Future, so I compare it to a gigawatt. Anybody who's seen that movie can make the reference, but a zettabyte is 20 zeros behind it. So we're talking a very large number, and it's actually very hard for anybody to wrap their head around how big that is. And that's one of the things that we're trying to really get a concept of the data that's out there, and then how much data is going to be available. They're saying in the next 5 years or so, we're going to be stretching to 200. So quadrupling that number, which is already staggering and mind blowing. And it's kind of, you start to feel overwhelmed with the concept. But I actually did, I wrote a small article on this a few months ago, which is kind of the big data revolution. And everybody talks about big data. And it is big, 59 zettabytes or 200, but the data has to be more than just big. It has to be fast. It has to be useful. It has to be resilient. All these things it has to be, not just a lot of it. 200 zettabytes sitting out there is not going to do anybody if it didn't have usefulness. And for the longest time, with the concept of business intelligence, if you've heard of that, or analytics. Yeah, analytics. Yeah. You can get a lot of insights into the world around us, into your business, make better decisions. But there was a limitation. We can only absorb so much and know how to make useful sense of certain amounts of data. So, and that was probably, we're talking a fraction of the size of what I'm speaking to now. So how do we even begin to utilize that? Well, potentially we don't have to figure it out. It's the AI that will figure out how to use it, right? So we will be relieved of that burden. We can't figure it out. AI will happily figure it out. And I really think that's kind of where this is going, because you could easily say, and I agree that 200 zettabytes is astounding, but it's useless. But it won't be because of those reasons. It still will have to have those characteristics. AI, it has to be able to get to it fast, and it has to make sense of it. But I think AI will have that ability on the trajectory that it's on. Yeah. I mean, you even look at Google, and I don't know the numbers of data, amount of data that Google actually houses. But I bet you it takes up a very good chunk of that number I just described. So their AI backend is making use of that. And so I think it's just incredible that will be the way that it's almost figuring it out on its own at some point, if that makes sense. We create all this data, but the AI will figure out how to leverage it and make it useful for us.
Well, that's why when you talk about the future of work, it's the more we hear about this, the more mysterious but also complicated it appears where we're heading. So if somebody is overwhelmed right now by listening to you and worried about their future job and the job of their children and grandchildren, what tips do you give? What tips would you give them?
Well, don't be overwhelmed. I think today, and we're talking about a lot of things, and it is hard for someone to kind of grasp some of these concepts, which is what I keep trying to simplify everything and really get people to not be scared of it, but talk about it in terms that people can relate to and really maybe not embrace it, but get more comfortable with it. And that's kind of some of the things that I think are fun and enjoy doing and working with people to do. But the main things I've kind of been advocating, there's a few, but one is all this change that's happening, and kind of as I described it, it will continue. The 2020 that we experienced last year is, to me, some of the beginning of the rapidness of change that we're going to see, because companies are now seeing that, okay, we got over that hump and kind of almost pushing the envelope a little bit on what we can do next. And I think people need to get more comfortable. I think that is hard, but nobody likes change. And we're going to all have to deal with quite a bit of it. And AI even aside, it's just the world is changing around us. Every other week, it seems like there's some unprecedented event. Don't you agree? I hear it all the time. There's something else that's unprecedented. So that to me is trying to say we need to build ourselves up to accept change, be ready for it, and adjust. AI is certainly going to play a piece of that. And the more ready you are for that stuff, I think it's going to be a big way for you to overcome and kind of embrace what's going to happen in the future. So the other thing is, as good as AI is, and I use the heck out of it as much as I can to get the weather and call for a pizza or whatever. But those are convenient things. But I'm not losing sight of I'm doing that convenient thing so I could spend time on something that's more productive. Hopefully, usually.
What you're doing is you're having AI order the pizza so you can watch The Social Dilemma.
That's right. There you go. That's a good example.
Here we go. Yeah.
But so it's important we don't get lazy with AI and its ability to continue to support and do more things for us. We can't allow ourselves to get lazy. Staying in front of your skills, staying in front of being productive and not succumbing to maybe some of the conveniences that we're going to get with AI. So that's one of the things I really push people. Don't let that fool you, because that if you let your guard down there, you don't keep your skills up, you don't invest in yourself to try to continue to grow, read, learn more. And AI is a good example. If you don't know a lot about it, I would recommend learning a little bit about it so that you're prepared. Those are two critical things that I try to get people to understand. And then
about soft skills and like emotional intelligence. So that's not something, at least in the near future, AI is going to master.
I think that and even Sophia aside, which is I think has a lot of potential to learn some of the interaction stuff. Yeah. The social skills of the companies of the future, they're going to want their employees to have good communication skills. And you've probably heard some of this before. Be leaders, be able to have emotional intelligence and work with teams and things like that computers just don't do well. And hopefully they won't be able to do that well for a long time. And then we can all at least secure that part. But I do think, and that's what I mean, but don't get lazy. I think some of the opportunity people have is to kind of keep those things sharp so that so that if we start to allow AI to do more for us, it won't be, we have some other things to fill the gap. And those are more vital to our long-term success anyway. And then we have to learn to work with AI. I mean, it's happening. You're probably, if some of you are working with AI in work right now, I think it's going to continue to be one of those things to master how to do that. And whether that be through using tools that become available to us, whether that be getting comfortable with almost assuming it's going to take on tasks. Mm-hmm. I proactively look for tasks that I can give to that just are time consuming. That I can give to.
As an example, other than ordering pizza and asking about the weather for work.
Oh, this is more at work.
Yeah.
At home, there's at work figuring out, well, how do I get the data I need when I need it to make timely decisions? How can we use automation to help our workflows so that we're more efficient in delivering to our customers? Mm-hmm. How can we how are we looking at what's going on in AI to better develop the products that we have and services? If we look 5 years down the road, are the things that we offer today as a company going to be what's embraced by our customer, or are they going to have different needs? And we believe they will be different. And so we're starting to do things now internally to build out different processes and different offerings so that we're ahead of that and not being caught off guard by it. And I think that's really important and important for everybody to kind of look at on their own, both at work and at home. Am I getting prepared for this? And I think a lot of people some people are underestimating, exactly how much is coming. But I think it's important that we invest in ourselves to do that.
Yeah. So what about like business owners, executives at companies? What advice would you give them? You mentioned just one, like if there's opportunity to use AI, go ahead and use it. But what else do you have for their competitive advantage?
It's like, without a doubt, every industry out there is being disrupted by AI in some way, indirectly or directly. It's kind of happening. And we feel that even the data center industry is being disrupted, not in the typical way like, the automation is going to take over, even though that's a tool that we can use to be better and more efficient. But with the proliferation of data, it's how do we make sure that the data is in the right spot for the right users at the right time? How do you manage all of this in a way that's going to be useful? So it's disrupting every industry, and even if you're in one that's isolated right now, there are pieces of the chain that are being disrupted now that you're going to feel some of that. And that's why it's kind of almost be aware. So look at your business plan. Are you doing things that are assuming that those are going to happen? Digital transformation, right? It's the buzzword that's out there. Has been out there for a few years now, and companies are embracing how technology is really going to advance the company. And some of those are working and some of them aren't. And I think it's really important to look at, if they aren't working, why? Did you go down it with the right perspective of what it really can do? And are you trying to change the whole business at once, or are you just changing pieces of it? It's kind of one of those things you really have to be kind of on point about how you're looking at it. But I do think it's going to disrupt everybody in some way. It's just how you're preparing for it.
Yeah.
The workforce is changing. The workforce of tomorrow, I mean, we saw in 2020, now if people can work from anywhere, then they can work for anyone, anywhere.
Right.
And it doesn't really, so the talent pool is going to get tougher. And companies going to have a little bit of a tougher time getting that talent in and keeping them if they don't have a good plan to share, if they're not engaging the employees. Everybody's heard of the term employee engagement, but it really is something that is going to be not just a differentiator going forward, I think a requirement. for a lot of companies to sustain a workforce that's going to get them to where they want to be. And if you're not doing that, then it could be a struggle, because the talent pool is going to become so much more in demand. And the other part of that, not just the lack thereof of talent pool, but also the skills required in the future, I think, are going to change. So it will be important for companies to augment those skills internally, so that their workforce is capable of working with AI. You know, what new tools are out there, or what new skills will they need to be able to work with the technology of the future? Yeah. I think that's going to have to happen in order for them to continue to be productive.
So it sounds like anyone who's not comfortable with change, and any organization that's not comfortable with change, they're going to be in trouble.
They might be in trouble, and hopefully that's nobody listening to this. And if you are listening, then kind of consider what you might need to start getting used to in the next year or two. It is happening fast. I think people do have time to prepare. And I think some people are going to just do better with it than others.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you agree?
Like the talent of the future, I think about your daughter, the story you said. I think about my nephew, the talent of the future, and how they see things very differently. And they don't need to go memorize stuff. They can easily access it on Google, and they're comfortable with, as you said earlier, how they're engaging with AI.
That is so true. That is so true. And I don't, sometimes it's a little bit, it's like I want them to use the technology, but sometimes it feels a little bit like they need to go and read a book to learn that. You kind of don't want to lose some of the hard work that needs to go into developing skills and learning sometimes. And that is a balance we have to, as leaders and parents or whatever, kind of embrace that. Don't just take the easy way because it's easy all the time. You know, certain things are going to be easy because we can be efficient and be more productive in other areas. But I think the other route may not be the path that we want to go on. And so it's a balance. I think most people would agree, especially if you're in a company or if you have kids at home, you'll know it's always a balance to that.
You know, to me, with the work I do for diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's hilarious thinking about AI, because now AI may be considered a team member that would want to feel included and wants to get a sense of belonging. So what do you think about that?
That concept seems far-fetched, but it's really not. I think at some level, it's not like it I think it'll affect our thinking more than it's actually happening, right? We will have this because it'll look more and sound more like us than it ever did, potentially. Well, we gravitate to that as a human, as one of our own. So you kind of start to associate it with normal human characteristics, but even if it's not, and that will be the thing that we'll have to get past it is, but it's not. So it doesn't have the same rights and things like people do. But I would speculate that some people will argue. Someday people will argue they should.
It's coming. Yeah, there will be an argument. Yes.
We'll cross that bridge when we get there. But for now, that's where I'm standing.
For now, we'll just stick with Roomba. And
the Roomba, right? Little Sophie will be here. You know, I definitely think
little Sophie, you're ready.
We'll see how well she does. If she can tie shoes and things like that.
You know, it's hilarious because her name is Sophia, and now you call her Sophie. So you're already.
I know. You see, it's that human name. You can't help it. You have the nickname for it already. It's like. It is who we are as people. We can't help but try to put that round personality on it, and so that will be a weird thing in the future.
This is just too funny. That's hilarious. Yeah, once you get little Sophie, we would want both of you, or maybe just little Sophie.
she can handle the whole conversation.
Yeah, I would want to have a conversation with her.
It's amazing where it's going, and like I said, because I really embrace all this stuff, it's a little easy for me to accept and kind of continue to learn about it. But I know a lot of people are looking at it a little differently, and I just think it's one of those challenges that we're going to have to embrace in the future.
Yeah, good. So we have a few minutes left. What are some of your final thoughts in addition to everything you shared? So you have been very successful in terrifying everybody listening, including myself. So congratulations. If that was your goal, mission accomplished.
That was the goal. It's definitely, actually, it's the opposite of the goal. It's more to educate. But we, some things, you learn about some things and they're a little bit scary. I mean, the social dilemma did that to me, right? It's like you see these and you realize that it is true that these things are going on. It's how you're going to deal with it. And it's that ability to accept the change and work with change. I think that's some of the main things that I'm trying to advocate, and just be prepared. Prepare yourself, prepare your company, and talk to others about it and what they're doing about it. I think as we can see with the onset of mobile devices, people embrace technology. People love their phones. They use it all the time. Mm-hmm. They don't necessarily, I don't think, see it as the AI counterpart, which is trying to take my job and all the bad things happen, even though they love everything the phone can do, but it has artificial intelligence in it as well. Yeah. So it's kind of, you have to correlate, well, see how good that could be. It's where we want all of the, where we're heading to with AI overall, but there'll be some challenges and some bumps in the road, but we'll get there. Hopefully not too scary.
I can't wait to see little Sophie in a self-driving Tesla.
Oh God, that image is not in my mind.
Then we're good.
You talk about freak people in the parking lot out. Yeah, that would, the doll driving the car. It's worse than nobody driving the car.
That is so funny. And they're both communicating data up there somewhere.
And to each other. No telling.
Well, Noah, this was amazing. Thank you. It was so much fun. And I know I enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure our viewers are enjoying it as well. And I can't wait to invite you back once you get little Sophie, so we can have more conversation. Thank you everyone for joining, and continue to join us for the Chit Chat with Dima and Rob every Wednesday at 7 p.m.
Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Noah.